Okay, good morning everyone. I'll declare Council meeting CL24/9 open. Welcome everyone here. She'll start with the usual karakia. Whakatau mai te wairua, whakawātea mai te hinanaru, whakarite mai te tinana, ke ea nai ngā mahi. Ai. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed and the consequences of that. I have an apology for lateness from Councillor Daly. Can I have a mover and seconder for that, please? Councillor Murray Benge, Councillor Granger. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. I'm not aware of any late items. Does anyone have a declaration of interest? No, thank you. There are no public excluded items, so we'll move on to public forum. And we have Roger Goodman and I believe Rob Mitford to talk about Precious Family Reserve. So over to you, gentlemen, and if you'd like to say your piece. I note there's a tabled item in Councillor's Stella.
Oh, good morning. Thank you very much for the I'll sit down. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity, and councillors. Rob Mitford and I both live in Imokoroa, and I live in the Imokoroa Country Estate. I'm the chairman of the Imokoroa Environment Managers Incorporated, and part of that is a group of member operating groups, one of which is called the Friends of Precious Family Reserve. And in conjunction with the neighbours who are adjacent to this reserve, we are presenting today on some enhancements that we would like to see to the Precious Family Reserve, particularly around the extension of the walkway which has been developed around the golf course. Now, the golf course walkway is used by cyclists, by walkers, by people with pushchairs, people taking their dogs down there, but the access through the Precious Family Reserve is quite restrictive in terms of its weatherability. It gets very flooded at certain times, and other times it's quite a very rough surface. In fact, yesterday I observed a young woman with a baby in arms and a baby in a pushchair trying to negotiate some of the rocky stuff there. So one thing that we would like to see is the extension of the surface that's around the golf course extended back into the Precious Family Reserve. The second point that we'd like to present on this morning is the possibility of moving a planned toilet block. On the picture that you can see in front of you is in actual fact a picture from Rob's home, and the toilet block is planned to be put approximately where the arrow is on the screen there. What we're suggesting is that you could move it slightly around the corner, and that would be a place to go. If I flick to Google Earth, and here we go. So this is a view of the area called the Precious Family Reserve. It has, oh sorry. Oh, thank you. Once upon a time I worked for IBM and I used to sell mainframes. Using these things is a bit different these days. So the Precious Family Reserve has a waterfront, and you can see this path that goes around the edge of the golf course here. And what we're talking about is this access way through the Precious Family Reserve. It's quite rutted, very rough and stony. The pathway through here is well formed and is also used by vehicles for access, but only on a very rare occasion. This is the area that we see the public using, particularly during summer, as they have good access to the beach. And there's very few swimming accesses around the Imokoroa Peninsula. The point that we're saying here is that let's move the toilet from this position here to around the corner, literally around the corner, and site it just about here. So that gives more access to people who are on the beachfront, as distinct to putting it over this side. Designated at the moment, this is a shared walkway and pathway, but also there is a provision for parking in terms of the surface that's underneath the grass. So by putting a toilet block here, you'd restrict the amount of parking that would be available for people to access the beachfront down here. That was just another point that I thought was worth making. So this is, if you like, a bit of a view of the entrances to and down through the things around. Between the end of Hamurana Road and Anderley Avenue is already existing on the council plans a paper road, so that can't ever be built on. And as we have these existing pathways through here, we see the upgrading of this section of the access way to the Precious Reserve beachfront as being actually a priority of this area. But then, as you can see, popping the toilet block just over here is going to make it much easier for people to access it from the beachfront as well. Rob, do you want to say something to that?
You've covered basically the things that I was going to talk about, but I've lived there for 6 years, and in that 6 years, the walkway has gone in around the golf course, and the increase in pedestrian traffic has been huge. The type of users, just walkers, fitness people, cyclists, a lot of elderly people. I think that walkway is surely a great asset. And when you look at the construction of it, it's got fairly heavy timber edging and very simple light gravel in between. And it's been there for 3 years and there's been no real deterioration in it at all. And that's probably quite a cheap way of continuing the walkway from where it finishes at the beach through the Precious Reserve and up to Anderley Avenue. And the walkway along the beachfront is also used by the service vehicles that go along there, utility vehicles, and there's no reason why that similar type of walkway continued up to Anderley Ave would still allow those service vehicles to come through. So just on the walkway, excuse me, just on the walkway, I think that would be a fairly reasonable and adequate way to address the issues that we currently see there. The current walkway, it's rough, it's uneven, it's got potholes, it's full of water, it's shared by some vehicles and pedestrians, it's not well signposted, and it's used basically by a lot of older people. So I think we could look at improving that and at a fairly reasonable cost. Parking, there is a reasonable amount of use of the parking at the end of Hamurana Road. It's not probably adequately set out for parking. A lot of vehicles come down to that area, turn around and go back again, and they drive up onto the berms and they drive into the entrances of the houses to turn around. So perhaps a little bit of thought could go into improving that parking area at the end of Hamurana Road. And that would probably keep the traffic out of the Precious Reserve as well. The vehicular traffic that use Precious Reserve at the moment, people coming down there during the summertime, high tide, you might get quite a few vehicles there during that time. But other than that, there's not a lot of use of that reserve by the vehicles. Lately, probably windsurfers and kite sailers are the people that come down here because they bring their equipment down to unload and take down to the beach. So those are the 2 points, the walkway, the use of the vehicles, the vehicle parking at the end of Hamurana Road, and again, the toilet block. We live right on the reserve. We look across that beautiful view as the photo I took this morning. I think there were about 4 or 5 people walking dogs. It was just lovely. It would be an eyesore to have a toilet block right out in front of our place. And I'm sure if any of you live there, you would object to having a toilet block spoil that view. Putting it around the corner into the other part of the Precious Reserve, probably about 2 metres of base course would be all you would need to raise it up above the floodplain level, and then probably about 10 to 15 metres of extra service piping to connect to the toilet block. Just a small shift and at a fairly reasonable cost.
Thank you, Roger and Rob. I think we better move on to questions now. I did want to just clarify with you the position of the toilet block. Has that moved since the original concept plan, or do you know, perhaps tell us why it was in the position that it is proposed now rather than around the corner?
About a month ago, there was a contractor there measuring up for the position of the toilet block. So my wife went down to speak to him, and he was working out the structure of where it was going to go. So I assume that it's been planned to put there, right out in the reserve there by the current sewage treatment facility.
But you're not aware of a particular reason why it's in that position rather than around the corner?
But I don't know why it was put there, I don't know.
Okay. Councillor Granger.
In the document that was sent out last night, it's on Stella, there's a map of all the constraints of this underground storage tanks and all sorts of things. So they've had to just work around all the constraints on site. So they've ended up, it has to be so many metres from here and so many metres from there and whatever. So that's where it's ended up, and that's why the utilities people have put it there. And while I've got the mic, those of you who've got this piece of paper handed out this morning, on the aerial map, the toilet block is actually in the neighbour's property. You need to move it the other side of the fence. You put your little blue square in the wrong place.
That's just my ineptitude at using PowerPoint. I apologise for that.
And Roger did indicate to us that if the toilet block was moved, that there was funding. And where did funding come from?
We've received a grant of $5,000 from the centre which is the op shop, if you like, the Centre Trust of Omakurawa, and that's for the improvement of facilities within the Precious Family Reserve. So to me, that's part of what we could do. Some of that we used in the planting of 6 Maori Princess Pahuta kawas just last week to try and compensate for the loss of the shelter belts that are going through, to provide some kind of a bird corridor between the Kuni Reserve on the eastern side of the peninsula and the Precious Reserve on the western side of the peninsula. The rapid increase in the urbanisation of the Omakurawa Peninsula, I think, makes it essential that we upgrade the reserves and provide better access to beachfront, etc., for those ones. And as I said, Rob seems to think that it's mainly the elderly who are using it. And yes, it comes straight off the Omakurawa Country Estate, but there's many, many young families down there, and the Omakurawa Point School is absolutely crammed to the gunnels with young children. So that's another aspect that the school is very, very hopeful for, that we can provide better access down there, because it then becomes another playing field for them. And having a toilet block down there will mean that the children and staff can stay in there a bit longer. And as I pointed out in the document that I have prepared today, and I apologise for not having it in your information packs this morning, parking it around the corner is going to give better privacy for not only the people using the beachfront, but also for the children and the teachers who are working down there. They're not sitting in the gaze of people who are using the seat or who are coming down to the car park. And I think that might be an important issue to take away as well.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Murray Bench.
Thank you for the presentation. When the toilet block was first suggested, Mr. Chairman, it was there was nothing there really, and so it was a logical place to put it, and then obviously development has occurred. But 2 questions. The water that sits in that precious reserve, does it drain away quite quickly?
Yes, it does. Yes.
And the other question is, you're not looking for a hard surface, you're looking for a reasonably priced surface so you can extend that walkway.
Yes.
Yeah.
Roger did say to us that there is funding available if you want to shift the toilet block around the corner. He has got funding available to contribute towards the extra piping that would be needed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray Bench. As you can see here, this is in a flood situation, but this is the swale that takes the water from the eastern side of the Precious Reserve down to the shorefront. And this is the walkway that Rob is referring to here. So it's really an extension from the bollards back towards Hamirana Road and to Anderley Avenue. And as you can see here, just very briefly, the current toilet site is back towards us in this picture, and the preferred toilet site is just around the corner past this tree. Definitely not on the neighbour's property, Councillor Granger, thank you. Again, this is a view to the left of this picture showing the extent of the heavy deluge that we had, I think it was probably about 12 months ago, and how the water will flow away.
Thank you. I'm going to hand over to Chief Executive to make a comment on perhaps where things are or where you want to go.
Just a quick comment. You're right. We have measured up. Toilet blocks actually being purchased. We're just working through the project at the moment in terms of installation. This morning, I've just asked the team to check whether we have any other options in terms of the placement of the toilet block per your request, understanding the constraints that Councillor Granger has talked about this morning as well. So we'll just do our last check to see whether we do have any other options within the reserve before we go ahead.
Great, thank you. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up there and move on to our next public forum speaker. But thank you very much, gentlemen. I appreciate your time and giving your presentation.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to come.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Murray.
Okay, I understand our next speaker is Sarah Clement, who is on Zoom. I got the spelling right. It's Clement, isn't it? Thank you.
Yep, that's correct.
I believe she will talk to us about numbers. So over to you, Sarah, and look forward to hearing about what we have to say.
Thank you for having me. So last night I attended the meeting in the Orchard Church, which was for to talk about the number one road rehabilitation. So the number one road rehabilitation that I'm in, I live on 62 number one road, and I believe that's supposed to start in the 1st of October. So it's quite a big one because the road was there in 1959. I think it's the first time it's getting rehabilitated in this manner. So this is pretty major for us residents. The point that I wanted to bring up or raise awareness to, sorry, I'm shaking, I'm very nervous, is the fact that a lot of the sentiment of the residents understand that when we get a big, smooth, beautiful new road that goes through our residential zone, although it's 50 Ks, a lot of the heavy traffic and like smaller traffic speed a lot through there. And although we're a residential zone, there is nothing, as Cedric was saying last night, there is nothing to indicate that we are a residential zone. And so I'm wanting to bring before you guys what I would like more traffic soothing or traffic calming to be implemented in our area, and especially to indicate that we're a residential zone, because right now it's treated as a rural road because of we have Trevelyan's pack house right at the top. And although we have signage, it's only just been introduced, that signage, in the last year or two, with it being dropped from 80 Ks down to 50 K. And so we still get a lot of the old habits there. And I'm one of those freaks that invested in like a $500 speed camera monitor. And I could, I have video tapes that they don't go as the 50K suggested, because they've been going up and down that road for the last 30 years as contractors, and they're going to stick to their 80 to 100K zones because it very much gives the feeling of a rural road. However, it is a residential zone. I've got young children, and I would like to see more traffic soothing or traffic calming, and after the road is rehabilitated. So I'm not sure they're going to widen it, but it's a question that I would like to have. Like last night when I tried to ask them what they could do that was traffic soothing, they didn't have any answers for me at that point, saying like, we're just rehabilitating the road and it stops from there. But it is very much a concern that when you get a beautiful new road and it's smooth, that we're going to have even more speed. And you see why I'm so worried about speed is not just because it's speeding, it's because it shakes all our houses so bad. It shakes the living daylights out of our house. And so I would usually not be too worried about speeding in my own situation, not too bad, but it's with this shaking of the houses for us all, we're just thinking that it's going to get worse. Because I don't know how deep they're drilling down to in terms of the aggregated road concrete. If it shakes the whole hillside, that's when we notice that when they go slower, that it doesn't shake so much. And so we're just looking for traffic soothing and also to raise awareness that it is a residential zone and that we're not a rural road. And we are a cluster of houses that live up there and live residential lives, and the bus pulls in to come in and drop the kids off and pick the kids up. So yeah, I would just like to raise awareness about that for afterwards, for when the work is done. I believe like more work will have to be done. Yeah. Hopefully that makes sense. Residential zone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. That was a very good presentation, and yeah, I understand the nerves, but no, thank you. Were there any questions for Sarah? Councillor Wickers.
Hi, Sarah. I haven't met you. I've met most people up there. The concerns that you raise is nothing new. It's fully on the radar, so be assured that we will be continuing to keep those points front and centre. You would have seen that we had the police there last night, and I specifically asked Mike to come along because we know it's going to be a combined effort to deal with speed there. So that's why I had Mike there as well.
Thank you, Councillor Wickers. I'm just going to invite Cedric, our General Manager on Infrastructure, to speak to this one and perhaps let us know what's in the plans or what's being considered.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you, Sarah. And it was good conversation last night on that. And I think Cullum and I, understand where you're coming from and in terms of those extents. And I guess one of the questions that we talked about after that was the actual urban limit of that, whether the transition from 50 to 80 or whatever that might look like, or how far you actually extend the urban threshold down there. So we are going to look at that in that work, because you do have that bit of gap in between a cluster of houses on your initial point of number 1 road, and then as you go down a bit further on the S-bend, there's another sort of cluster there on whether you could actually make the argument that the urban extent could be pushed down from a traffic perspective. So I understand what you're saying. There is a clear barrier between, obviously, when you get to that point of 70 kilometres and above, when it then switches over to a more of a rural road, you start looking at productivity. But to your point, it's not one size that fits all in terms of that particular road. So it is on our radar to look at what that might look like in terms of traffic calming, whether it's threshold fencing, whether it is extending speed restrictions subject to Waka Kotahi approval. So that is on the radar. And we have taken that away to do more work, so when we actually start constructing the S-bend as part of the stage 2.
Thank you, Cedric. Are there any further questions for Sarah from around the table? No? Okay, well, in which case, I think we'll move on. But thank you again, Sarah, for zooming in. I appreciate your comments and bringing this to our attention. And I'm glad last night was helpful for you and the other people in Te Puke. So with that, we shall move out of public forum and onto the minutes for receipt, the Community Board minutes for receipt to start with. So from page 8, we have the minutes of the Te Puke Community Board meeting held on the 1st of August. Can I have a mover and seconder to receive those, please? Councillor Wickers, Councillor Daly. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Minutes of the Makatu Community Board meeting held on the 6th of August. Deputy Mayor Scrimger, Councillor Ray. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Moving on to the council and committee minutes for confirmation from page 23. So the minutes of the annual plan and long-term plan committee meeting held on 26th of August. Deputy Mayor Scrimger, Councillor Murray Benge. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Minutes of the council meeting held on the 12th of September. I shall move those. Deputy Mayor Scrimger, second. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. And now we move on to the reports. Item 11 from page 79, adoption of financial contributions 2024-2025. So Adele, would you like to introduce this one for us, please?
Thank you, and through the Mayor, as this paper's already been received through the Annual Plan and Long-Term Plan Committee, it's a recommendation for Council to adopt these today, having been through consultation, and the feedback has been acknowledged, and we'd like to present these for adoption today. Thank you.
Okay, with any comments or questions you'd like to ask first before we move? Councillor Granger.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Do we need to add a fourth recommendation allowing the CEO to make editorial changes to correct a mistake or two?
Thank you, and through the Mayor, I would also put that as a comment, if we can add that as a resolution in conjunction with the other resolutions from the other papers today.
Okay, so if we can copy the relevant wording from the other items. Okay, so a similar one would be that the Chief Executive Officer be delegated authority to make such minor editorial changes to the long-term plan, or sorry, to the financial contributions, disclosure tables for financial contributions 24-25, as may be required prior to printing. Okay, everyone happy with that? Councillor Thwaites.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to this. I would like to congratulate the team that have worked on this because it has been an evolving issue, and I think for this to be in their agenda like it is, and the level of information on all the different FinCos is the step that was required, and I congratulate them for the transparency for that. It shows the massive investment that this council has to make over the coming years and segregates out that growth portion with the other portions in a fully transparent way. So all congratulations to the team who've put it together. And I think, yeah, we've probably been a little bit lax on some of the detail we've supplied in the past. So hopefully this goes a long way to rectifying that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Coxhead.
Apologies, I had intended to email this question, but page 89, the historic capital expenditure for recreation and ecological, there is nothing in there for historic. Was there some reason for that?
Through the chair. So this is consistent with our previous disclosures. Because of the information and the level of detail at the moment, we don't have that full disclosure available, but we'll have that in the future.
Councillor Joyce.
Given the substantial increases in there, how confident are we that growth will start paying for growth now? You know, obviously we've done, and thank you to the staff for a big effort to clean up some issues, but, you know, does this go as far as growth paying for growth? Because that's the ultimate issue, isn't it?
Through the chair, this is obviously a big challenge for councils all around the country. There are many inputs into growth paying for growth as being a philosophy to follow, but unfortunately it's not an exact science, you know, with timing, with interest, with costs, with projects. So as best to our ability, the level of detail that we're now going to hopefully provides for that philosophy to be met. But yeah, there's still some unknowns that we obviously can't manage, which is why some councils then have to go back and look at what they do in terms of seeking any gap in terms of that growth pay for growth back through the ratepayer.
Councillor Mo Benj.
Knowing that things have slowed down considerably with the economy, Adele, are we confident that our developers will be able to cope with these increases?
I'm not sure that's a question for Adele, to be honest.
What question then is, have we had any negative response from the development community as to the increase in these charges?
Well, I think the answer there is we went through a consultation process and we've received submissions. I'm not aware of, perhaps you'd like to comment if you've had any other comments outside of the submission process, but I think the submissions are where to look mainly.
Through the chair, it is a challenging time, as we know, and the work that we have undertaken is to provide for cost-effective infrastructure, looking at our options in that regard. But what we do know is that compared to some councils, our financial contributions tend to be less expensive than some, not all. So where we can, we're doing what we can, but you know, there are options for council to provide for developer options if required, but that's not at the discretion of council officers.
I think through Mr. Chair, I think that one of the big questions to my mind is, have we got our strategy right in terms of infrastructure just in time? So all these things, whether growth pays for growth, whether financial contributions are right, I think the big one for us is that, are we talking to our developers and ensuring that we're not putting the infrastructure well in advance of the development and then incurring the additional costs? So that's a big one for us, is that we still maintain that principle of growth just in time, or infrastructure just in time.
Thank you, Cedric. Councillor Granger.
I'd like to move the 4 recommendations.
Okay, if there's no further questions, I'll check that first. Councillor Granger has moved. Councillor Reid has seconded. With that, Councillor Granger, with the additional one of the delegation for the CE to make editorial changes. I was about to put it, but Councillor Murray-Benj.
I just think, sir, that this has been really tough for staff working through this challenge, and they haven't done it lightly, and there's been plenty of consultation, and I think tough and all as it is, I think we have done the very best that we can. But I think they deserve to be thanked because it hasn't been easy. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Murray-Benj. So with that, I shall put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. So moving on now, we go to page 115, which is the recommendation to adopt the long-term plan 2024 to 2034 and related matters. So Rachel, I think you're up on this one.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am both delighted and relieved, and a whole lot of other adjectives, to be able to present this report to you this morning. Just to note that before you actually move to the most substantive resolution, I'd invite you to resolve recommendations 1 and 2, and before carrying on, inviting Audit New Zealand to deliver their opinion. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I think I will take that advice. So recommendation 1 and 2, which is to receive the report and that it relates to an issue of high significance. Do I have a move and seconder for those, please? Councillor Coxhead, Councillor Sol. I assume there's no debate, in which case I shall put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. So now, before we take the other recommendations, I will invite the auditors. I can see Leon on screen there and Anton to speak to their audit opinion. Leon or Anton.
Kia ora, Your Worship, and tēnā koutou to our councillors. Thank you very much for allowing us to attend your meeting. I agree with Rachel. It is quite a good feeling to get this one under the belt and ready for your adoption. We've completed our audit. We have provided our audit opinion because council have decided not to adjust for the NZTA Wakakutai funding. We are issuing a qualified opinion. And then the only other thing is we just refer to the capital doability or the capital project, because as with quite a number of councils across the country, there is uncertainty whether those projects will actually be achieved. So it is quite a normal emphasis of matter, that one. There's nothing weird on that. I'm not going to work through the opinion. We've provided it. I presume you've received it. Happy to take any comments or questions, and
Thank you, Leon. And just for the benefit of the councillors, the audit report is tabled item 3, which you should have received. Any questions for the auditors on this? Okay, there's none. Well, in which case I should take the opportunity to thank Leon and Anton and their team for doing the audit and working, as I understand it, well with council to get this over the line. Audit timetables and so on have been disrupted over the last few years, and it's been a challenge all round. So I'm pleased that this one is just about over the line and on the timetable that suits all of us. So thank you very much for that. So we'll move on to the other recommendations now. I've got a new recommendation number 3 to add or to insert, and I shall just read that out. That council notes the table of amendments, and that's table item 1, that outlines the amendments made to the draft long-term plan 2024-2034 that was originally included as attachment 1 to this report. So it's just a few amendments to the LTP document that we just need to note. Councillor Granger, question.
I have a question about table item 1. Sure. Okay. It does not mention the IAF issues on page 294, where we've allocated 63 million to IAF funding, which we don't get 63 million, so presumably that will be corrected as well.
Through the chair, that can be corrected, and we'll note that.
So noting there is a recommendation for editorial amendments if we see any more of those, okay? Okay, any more questions on this? No, okay. So there's just a couple more changes. So the new recommendation 4, we're talking about tabled item 2, which is the that's the final LTP document. New recommendation 5, we talk about table item 3, which is the audit report. And we also mentioned in the new recommendation 6 and 7, the reference to table item 2. I hope that's clear.
So our current number 3, is it, it's got the word draft long-term plan in there. Is it?
Yeah, so
long-term plan? Because we're not going to change it again.
okay, so that's been taken up. On there. Yeah, thank you. No, I appreciate that. It's different in my run sheet to the agenda. So in my run sheet, and what we want to move is the word draft has been taken out.
Another order's been, but yes, so the amendments were to the draft, but we're approving.
Well, amendments to the drafts, and then in recommendation 4, it said the word draft has been removed. So we're all happy with that. Any more questions? No? Okay, in which case I shall seek a mover and seconder for recommendations, well, the new 3 to 10. And I think I'll invite Deputy Mayor Scrimger as chair of the annual plan, long-term plan committee to move that. Do I have a seconder to that, please? Councillor Joyce? No? Okay. I'll second it then. So, do you want to speak to your motion?
Certainly, any long-term plan is a complex and demanding process, and I think this has been particularly so when we think of how we started work on this a long time ago and then had to restart again. And so I certainly acknowledge the relief of staff that was referred to by Rachel to finally get to this point. And probably be fair to say councillors feel some of that relief too. I guess the disappointment about it is this 13% increase in rates, and it sounds challenging. But I do think we need to remember that that's really, in many respects, a reflection of what has been happening around or in our country, and the costs that council faces flowing through in examples like insurance up more than 20% and others similarly. And so to arrive at a 13.5% approximately increase is comforting in some respects. I think council has taken a balanced approach to working through this exercise, trying to balance meeting the expectations of those who desire extra services and facilities versus the cost impacts of delivering those services, and on the other hand, people who expect us to show greater restraint in terms of increasing rates. So while there is a tinge of disappointment, I'm comfortable with where we've arrived in terms of this process and happy to recommend the acceptance of or the approval of these recommendations.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Scrimger. I shall speak to it as well. This has been a difficult LTP in circumstances where costs have been increasing rapidly and legislative uncertainty has been significant. I thank staff for all the work that has gone into this, including looking for cost savings, and I look forward to achieving great outcomes from this plan and making real progress for our district. So very keen to support this tough journey, and I appreciate the work that's gone into it. That's me. So, Councillor Granger.
I'd just like to put on record, congratulations to the design team for the final document. It looks good, and they've done a fabulous job with an awful lot of information to be presented in an attractive way.
Thank you, Councillor Granger. Any more speakers on this? Councillor Murray Bench.
I like to endorse what Councillor Granger is saying. The layout for the long-term plan for people, it's quite clear as to where we've made the tougher decisions. But I thought last night highlighted how important it is that roading and networking is to our communities. And so I think of NZTA and the fact that they're actually got their act together at last, and we can see progress coming on our network, which is really important. That's part of our long-term plan, sir, because you can't develop housing if you can't get the roads to go to where people want to live. And so that's quite important, and we remain one of the most expensive places in the OECD, just about, to build a home. And so I think we are in for significant change, but the foundations that this council has built are quite solid, and I think the staff are to be congratulated for getting us this far. And I know with long-term plans you can adjust them as we go along. It's not set in absolute concrete, and so the challenges remain with us to make sure that the next 10 years we do the very best we can, whether we're here or we're not here. Our staff will be, and so that's a changing feast as well. So I just think that we're a very fortunate local authority, and we may get a lot of criticism, but at the same time, the foundations that we've got, I think, are solid, and we're based in a position where we can negotiate a future from the point that we are in the best form we can be. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to staff.
Thank you, Councillor Murray Bench. Councillor Sol.
Thank you, sir. Well, I guess I'm disappointed in many ways, but I'm glad this has happened and come to an end, because it just had to happen. We you know, the timelines, plus the community needs to know as well. So it's just so important. I am disappointed that it's such a large increase, but I'm also realistic. We have to do and go about our business, and to do that we need money, and this is really our only source of money, and that's where it's landed. I can only hope that as we go through the term of the plan, especially the next few years, 2-3 years, that we're able to show that we can deliver as we have planned, and I guess as best we can, because there are so many other factors pushing things. I am concerned for a lot of people that are on lower incomes and or perhaps are committed, not necessarily on low incomes, but committed through maybe their own fault perhaps, but still committed to outgoings that make this change quite difficult. I hope that we're able to see a period of stability and things coming for them, that this won't be their final straw. The other areas, though, I do think addressing housing, etc., and enabling things, enabling the structures that we need, is the core is there. Again, congratulations to the staff in general for putting this all together. The actual document, which always worries me, and I made a comment, I think, at an earlier meeting, that at times we've only got a little period in which you can actually sell this document. And some of it comes with your comments at the start, sir, because that's usually the first thing they're likely to read. And the way it's structured is actually going to hold people's attention for a lot better than I think a lot of documents in the past. So congratulations on that. I think people are going to be better informed, and it's great to see that we have a direction and people can follow it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sol. Next up I have Councillor Coxhead.
I'm speaking as a first-term councillor, and having been a ratepayer and still am, obviously. In the past, I suppose as a ratepayer, and I appreciate a 13.7% increase in rates is is very challenging for people in our community who are on fixed incomes.
13.47.
And,
13.475. 13.45.
thank you for correcting me. And yeah, and I understand that it's challenging for people on fixed incomes and people who are struggling. And having moved into this position, I now understand how challenging it is from the other side in terms of trying to balance the exorbitant increase in costs for infrastructure and roading particularly. And these are the things that people care about most in our community, and that's what they really want us to focus on. But I do believe we've done the best with what we have, and it does come down to, if you want us to reduce the rate increase more, then what are you prepared to give up? And of course we see often people want more but don't want to pay more. And I understand that it's a very delicate balance as well. So I think this has been a really interesting process for me and very enlightening. And I feel like moving forward, we're definitely going to be more focused on the core things that really matter, and try and avoid wastage of money or as much as possible. So I think we've done everything we possibly can.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. It's enlightening to hear those insights. Thank you. Councillor Thwaites.
Thank you, Mayor Tenia. Look, for the first time ever, I'm going to vote against this. I'm not supporting this today, and I'll outline my reasons now. I believe we handled the water situation poorly. We continue to handle it poorly. This is the first time I've ever had the chance to speak about a 54.6% rate increase for urban Western Bay of Plenty stormwater charges. That came up after the final meeting, and I find that totally unacceptable. To have water charges go up 15% by volumetric, but only 1% per connection charge, I don't agree with that. Rural pumping charges, we can put up 4%, small communities 7.2%, but these other 15 and 54% just do not sit well, and I believe we've let people down and badly. I heard on the radio yesterday that the Christchurch City Council have started their annual plan process for next year, because they adopted theirs back in June, their LTP, and they've said to their community, they've released a press release that 8.5% now may be hard to achieve next year because of inflation pressures. I was disappointed. That was on the radio yesterday. I just about choked on my breakfast. The press release didn't say we are going to look everywhere to reduce charges and reduce it down. We've got a base for the next 10 years of 9%. These councils are talking 7% just as a starting point. I don't agree with that. I think things are changing dramatically fast. We've got to get back to basics. There is a lot to cut out. If there's 40 million in the waters, 20 millions in roads and 40 million elsewhere, if we're going to lose the 40 million in roads, we're going to have to make some drastic cuts if we are now a $60 million business. So I can't support this, and I won't be voting for it.
Thank you, Councillor Thwaites. Next up, I have Councillor Joyce.
It's not in many ways around here. I have crisis how they put out next year's plan. It's not just the first year, and that's a fairly horrendous 13+%. We also have high debt. We've managed to trim the worst of it around the edges, but this plan will hurt a lot of our ratepayers and residents. The reasons are widely known, from massive cost increases in insurance to recovering, frankly, from a poorly constructed council roading contract that we now need to spend more to make up for. Add in millions of dollars, and I do mean millions of dollars, from the new requirements from government for water and sewage, and we started a long way back before we even had our first meeting. We have collectively tried to save money and trim the rates increases in debt, but our success, frankly, has been quite limited. We need to acknowledge that we have much more work to do ourselves, and I do mean around this table. It's nothing to do with the staff, as the cuts we've made so far are minor in their effect. Just as bad, the budget we have come up with does not even solve some of the major problems of our district. Yes, we're addressing the stormwater issues on Waihi Beach, but can anyone really say this plan addresses the huge traffic woes in Te Puke, for example? It doesn't. We have a plan, and the auditors have just pointed this out, where we're going to spend more than $1 billion on capital projects over the next 10 years. But we really don't have enough money to build one major road if we needed to. And I suspect fixing Te Puke's problems is going to take a bit more than what's in this plan. So what next? Despite all the factors that are out of our control, we need to dig deeper ourselves. We need to review our levels of service. Quite often I was told that we can't cut this or that because it's all part of agreed levels of service that we've agreed with our residents. Changing these levels of service that have been agreed by previous councils largely is going to be a difficult conversation with our residents. We can't afford everything that previous councils have promised. Not if we're going to look after the roads and look after our communities. Secondly, we have some important decisions to make in coming months about our waters infrastructure, commonly known as 3 waters. That in itself is going to be a very difficult process because basically we have to ring fence it, and a huge chunk of our capital spend and a huge chunk of our debt is to do with that. Whatever decision we make, we're going to need to review deeply our own organisation. What is our role in the future if we're not doing that? And I know we've had some informal discussions about that already. We need to get to a situation where rates increases are kept to around the level of inflation for the sake of our residents and ratepayers. And by residents, I include people living in rental accommodation, because nowadays the rates on a rental property are easily around, $70 to $80 a week. It's getting extremely high. We need a much leaner organisation, and it's going to be a challenge for all of us. So we'll have much more work to do between now and the next long-term plan, whether we're here or our successors. We haven't got a handle on this yet. We've tried, but we haven't got a handle on it yet. The easy option today would be to vote against this, knowing that other people will vote to pass it. I don't agree with that approach. I understand Councillor Thwaite's thinking, but our council does need a budget to work to. We've got to be able to pay our staff. We've got to be able to do the work that we're doing. But we need to stop thinking that the status quo is okay, and we really need to change our thinking, all of us around the table, over the next 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Joyce. Councillor Murray Benj has already spoken. So,
Sir, could we suspend standing orders?
No.
So we can debate this debate that's just
you've had an
suddenly
opportunity.
arisen?
You've had an opportunity to debate, and now each person gets a turn around the table.
Well, if I haven't got a seconder, it can't be done. But
No, it's been moved by Deputy Mayor Scrimgeour and seconded by myself. So, are there any other speakers? Councillor Daly.
Yeah, it is. It is unfortunate that some people, when they open their rates bill, like they did a couple of weeks ago with their regional council rates demands, that they're going to get a bit of a shock. Fortunately, the pain doesn't fall on every sector. The average residential increase is $520 per annum, or $10 a week, which doesn't sound very much when you say it like that, but to quote the great Clester Eru from Makatu, that's, well, when we talked about a $3 per week increase, she said, well, that's a bottle of milk for my family. Now it's $10, so I guess now that's 2 bottles of milk for her family per week that she hasn't got. And like I say, the pain doesn't fall purely on the residential sector. Commercial and industrial is taking a step change upwards this term, and it's been signalled that that should go further. So I think those small commercial and industrial businesses that have just got a pretty small income based on a pretty small business are really perhaps going to hurt a bit when they see this one, if they're paying the rates bill. However, we also, during some of our early workshops and discussions, we were asked by the staff, what rates increase would you be comfortable with? And we talked about a band between 10 and 15%. And there was an indication that, closer to 15 is probably where it's going to have to be based on what we're facing. Some of us said, well, if you can take direction like that, then some of us said maybe it should be closer to 10. However, after our community forum expo last night in Te Puke, we did hear that people value the services that council provides, and they do want their roads fixed, they do want the water upgraded, and so this is just the reality of today's world. So I will vote in support of this recommendations. Thank you.
Thanks to Councillor Daly. I don't see any further people asking to speak, so I'll, Councillor Deputy Mayor Scrimgeour, would you like to reply before I put the motion?
I think the issues have been well covered around the table. And as Councillor Joyce said, council needs a budget. We need to be able to strike the rates and have an income to continue the work that we do. And so that's important. As disappointing as this is for many people, it's been well explained, I think, that this is the situation we find ourselves in, and so I think it's appropriate to proceed. I do think that it's not as simple as waiting for the next long-term plan to come around. We need to address things year by year as we go forward and see how changing circumstances develop, particularly in this case over the next 9 months rather than over the next 12, and strive for opportunities to improve on the performance that we've suggested will be coming over the next few years. So yes, I do think it's an appropriate plan, and I think it's good that we support this and move on.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Scrimgeour. So I'll now put the motion, in fact, those recommendations 3 to 10. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. So I think we'll move to the next item, which is setting of the rates, and then we'll break for morning tea. So we've got a set of recommendations there. Is Adele, are you presenting this, or is Jonathan? Adele.
Through the chair, so yes, having had council now adopt its long-term plan, we are in a position now to set the rates for 24-25. So the paper from resolution 4 to 6 sets the rates. 7 provides for the discount offering for early payment and other minor matters of council that council needs to consider in its full resolution of the setting. But yeah, I'll be happy to answer any questions or put those to the team, but this is the formal resolution process of the setting. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Daly.
Thank you, Adele. My question is, which maybe I should know the answer to, but our community halls targeted rate, several of them exceed the $50 limit that I thought we had imposed as a limit that we didn't want to exceed. But have we changed our financial policy to accommodate that? And maybe could you add a bit of context about why these rates have increased so much?
Microphone now.
Your Worship, perhaps what I can clarify through to Councillor Daly is that our community halls are not immune from cost increases like we are. One matter that we have identified for the next annual plan is a much closer look at the existing community halls policy and/or robust engagement with those specific communities for whom their community board rate is exceeding $50 per household or per ratepayer. So that is something that we are looking to progress as an annual plan item.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Thwaites.
Apologies, I didn't write it down the other day when I read that. It's regard to the penalty dates for payment, non-payment of the first instalment of the rate. Is that part of this process now? It is? Because I would like, when we get to that point, seek an amendment to move it back 2 further months from the November date, I think it was that I read, given that we are 3 months late setting the rates already, and that given that our rates examples that we set out, especially to urban Western Bay of Plenty, have differed significantly from what we posted earlier to what now they're going to get in the mail. If they're expecting X, they're going to get X plus more as a regard of that late change to the stormwater charging. So is there a chance that we can delay that penalty date back to sometime after Christmas? That was all I was raising it now in the question.
Perhaps I'll just clarify, how long between sending out the invoice and the penalty date is it normally?
Through the chair, we've applied the normal timeframes, but we do acknowledge that this information has only been approved by council at this point in time.
3 months late.
Council may have the discretion to change those dates should it wish.
Right. Okay. We'll come to that in the debate, I guess. Are there any further questions? Oh, sorry, Councillor Mayburn had a question.
One of the really good things that we do on page 197 is clause 8, and a lot of people don't know that we actually do it, but for those people who are strapped for cash and over 65, they can actually postpone the fees, their fees, and it can go onto their estate so that when the property is sold, council recoups the money at that point. Is this a $50 a one-off charge, Adele? We're not putting it on every year, are we? Or are we? Clause 8, 197.
It's an admin fee, I think, but it's a one-off admin fee.
Sorry?
It's a one-off admin fee, as I
That's what
understand
I'm
it.
asking. You're not going to add it year by year?
No, but I might refer to the team. Yes, a one-off, confirmed.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Joyce.
Just a quick question on my favourite topic. How quickly will the new rates be up on the website for people to look for their own properties, please? I know you're dealing with difficult technology, but it's important for people to be able to see quickly, those that are interested, what their rates will be.
Through the chair, I can confirm that will be Monday.
Okay, any more questions? No? Okay, so there are 10 recommendations? Quite a long piece. 10 recommendations here, but I did want to look to Councillor Thwaites to maybe, rather than do it as an amendment, just to move what he would like to suggest. Because it does say the penalty on or after the 2nd of October, which does seem a very... Oh, that's for water though, isn't it? Oh, no, so unpaid rates except water, sorry, yes. Can I suggest...
Number 2, it says after the penalty date is the 5th of November 2024. 7C2.
Councillor Thwaites, can I possibly suggest that staff come up with a suitable extension of the date? Well, yeah, we agree, but something that works in terms of their systems and their experience of how that process works.
So can I just ask a question? Because I mean, the rates bills will be going out. So have we got time to, if we don't make a decision today, have staff got actually time to implement a change?
Well, that's part of what I'm suggesting, is that we need to think this a little bit further.
Through the Mayor, having spoken with the team, we can set a date at the discretion of council, but if council would like to extend, I would recommend to the end of November. So 30th of November.
Half weeks would be good.
Okay, so you're happy to move those 10 recommendations with that change in there, that the penalty date is for the 30th of November?
Apologies, can I just make one change? We've just noted that date's actually the weekend, so can we please make it the 29th of November?
29th, okay. Okay, Deputy Mayor Scrimgeour, would you like to move it then? Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Murray Bench, thank you. Would you like to speak to your motion, please?
I think we've said it all. This is for this initial year. In the previous discussions covered it off. We put those recommendations in place, and this enables us to do that, and we have to make this happen, as has already been pointed out, so the business of council can continue to function.
Thank you.
I wanted to make the point, I did make the point before, that the long-term plan is an important document, but we have annual plans that come in as well every year, and that's an opportunity again to keep making sure that we're as financially prudent as we possibly can be. So this idea that suddenly the long-term plan has got all these increases in it, well, maybe it has at the moment, but there is no reason why they should be there as we go through the long-term plan. So we have a challenge in front of us, Mr. Chairman. I didn't agree with the amendment, but I've seconded it. And so I think let staff get on with the job. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just say a few words. Whilst the rate rise of 13.47% is higher than we would have wanted, I think we all agree around the table, I'm pleased that we've brought it down from the first iteration, which was well into the 20s, and have ended up with an increase somewhat lower than the average across New Zealand. And I hope that we can continue to increase rates at less than the average to bring our point in that league table down a wee bit. But we, as others have said, we need money to do what council does, to provide services and look after our people in the community and provide the water and roads and everything else. So that's where the rates have landed. So does anyone else have speak to the motion? No? Okay, in which case I shall put that. It's been moved by Deputy Mayor Scrimgeour, seconded by Councillor Murray Benj, with that change around the penalty rate for the 29th of November. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. And with that, I think we'll break for morning tea and come back at 5 to 11. Thank you. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We'll move on with the rest of the council meeting. So the next item is local water done well, the next steps, from page 200. I'd like to welcome, in addition to Ariel, who's going to present, I've got Sarah Badley from Martin Jenkins as well. So over to you, and please take us through this one.
Morena team. So this paper follows the... Closer, sorry. Is that better? Yeah. A bit more? I'll move all my other things, hang on. Right, is that better? Okay, thank you. Morena team. So this paper follows the 2 workshops that we've had on this same issue and is a consequence of the government's changing legislation in terms of the management and future of the 3 waters. So you'll note that one of the things that we talk about in the report is signalled requirements. So the 3rd bill that the government intends to bring out is coming in December. So it is prudent for us to be working on this, but not be making any specific decisions about what your preferred option is at the moment until we have that legislation in place and can make an accurate assessment against that. I just want to make that point to make it quite clear what we're doing today. So what we're doing today is we are accepting the report from Martin Jenkins. That report is attached to your paper as well as the minutes from the 2 workshops that we had. And that report says, basically has the findings that came through those workshops and the work that Martin Jenkins has done. So you'll recall the first workshop we went through and talked about the assessment framework, what was coming, and some criteria and objectives to assess viability and sustainability against. The second workshop took us through those initial findings and some of the information that had been presented to Martin Jenkins, and they presented it back to us in terms of the way our waters were operating as it stands and how they might look against potential future requirements. Following that, we've got today to adopt that report. Some of the conclusions of that report are that there are some challenges for us going ahead. Some of those we knew, some of them are slightly newer to us. And we also still have the legislative uncertainty in terms of that 3rd bill, although we have some clear signals about it. In terms of the recommendations, you'll see there that there is the recommendation to receive the report, the recommendation to receive the report from Martin Jenkins, and then 3, 4 and 5, we have Council agrees to the exploration of alternative water service delivery models from the status quo. So that is just looking at what we need to do in order to keep moving forward and implementing the government's legislation in terms of water. The second, number 4 there is about directing the Chief Executive to work with Tauranga City Council to progress those investigations for a joint water services council controlled organisation. That carries on from some work that we have been doing at a staff level, and that has also been signalled by Tauranga City Council. And the 5th recommendation there is noting that you're not making a decision today about what your preferred water services delivery model is. That will come later, and we will also talk through the consultation requirements at that point in time. But we're signalling there that we intend to use the Local Government Water Services Preliminary Arrangement Act requirements. If there's any questions about the report, I'm happy to take those. If there's any questions about the Martin Jenkins report, probably the best place to start is Sarah. Thank you.
Okay, any questions? Councillor Granger.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is to Sarah. And in your Appendix 1, which is on page 35 of your report, it talks about the 32 separate water supply charges that council makes. But I note that we do not allow a number against consumption charges, which obviously we get money from. So my question is, why is that number not counted in our set of numbers?
Thank you for the question. The information that we've got contained in our report has come from council themselves. So I'd have to reflect on the material that council have provided and talk to your council officers as well. What I would say generally is the process of this work that you've commissioned was to really unpick and view your individual water services delivery, that is drinking water, wastewater and stormwater,
unpick it because you had in the round viewed water service delivery in the context of all of your council services. In doing so, we have discovered a number of issues around the treatment of different revenue streams and the treatment of depreciation and debt that is more about attribution than concern in a whole. So are we sort of sheeting it home to the right form of water service activity or not? In this particular case, and I know you alluded to it earlier and I had misunderstood which data you were referring to, I can't tell you exactly why this line is 0. Other than to say that we've gone through a process of verifying it, that it's the information that your team have provided us. It's not to give rise to concern about the quality of information on which you've been making decisions on in the past, because the way you've been doing your accounting and financial modelling in the past has been at the whole of council level. So I can't answer that specific question. I'm not sure if council officers can for that particular line item in Appendix 1, but I can say that the process we have had has been unpicking the combined view of water service delivery, and so there are some anomalies that we have discovered, and we will report those and explain why where we can in the body of the report.
Thank you. Councillor Coxhead. Sorry, do you have another question?
Well, I haven't got the answer, so it was flicked across to council staff, so can council staff give me the answer?
Are they able to, I think it might be appropriate to let them come back to you on that, unless they've got it in their tip of their tongues now.
Yep, through the Mayor, we will, the team is having a look now and we'll come back to you.
Thank you. Councillor Coxhead.
Just for clarification, with the ring fencing of the revenue and the expenses, is it for each individual type of water, or is it for the whole, like the stormwater, the freshwater, wastewater, all packaged together? I can't remember.
Yeah, so it is expected that you would be able to report against activity type. So that is drinking water and wastewater in particular are the two waters that will be required to be examined closely. When it comes to stormwater, you will have the ability to consider whether you want to retain stormwater and provide it yourself, because the assets are very difficult to separate from your other assets like your open water stormwater treatment systems and recreational reserves and roads and things like that. So you will have to report by activity class and understand them by activity class. That's not to say they can't be managed in combination when it comes to things like balance sheet capacity, but you will need to properly understand what's driving the costs and what revenue is attached to them.
We're thinking of the headroom for the debt, for example. So those two, let's talk about those two, they can be combined, and the income and the expenses, etc., can be combined in one item, even though you'd separate them out just for, accounting.
It's hard to fully anticipate because the economic regulation regime detail isn't available, but generally what the economic regulator will be looking for is that you are tying the right revenue stream to the right asset over the right amount of time. When it comes to balance sheet capacity, then it really is the aggregate. Because they'll be looking at your overall balance sheet and the strength of that. So when it comes to revenue, typically tied to the activity of the service, and OPEX tied to the activity of the service, but when it comes to the balance sheet capacity overall, they'd look at it in the round. Just if I might, on this issue, because I do think looking forward it is one that you will need to pay close attention to. I think stormwater is where you need to put a little bit of mental effort and talk to your staff around stormwater. It is the area where you will have kind of a great degree of discretion about whether you're going to keep it or look for another service provider to provide it to you as a service. It's tricky to get your head around what the asset is, what the revenue stream would be, and it's also very clearly in terms of the nature of your communities, the area that is most subject to the most uncertainty in terms of forward capital investment and climate related risks. So of the waters, get your head around stormwater in terms of making sure that you have a good feel for where those forward risks, which are probably greater, will be best managed.
Thank you, Sarah. Councillor Mobench.
On clause 4 of the report, the CCOs are self-controlled organisations. always nervous about that type of structure. Auckland City Council have got it, and the councillors get all the complaints, have absolutely no influence, and so how can you design a structure whereby those that are elected do have some influence over what a CCO might, could, or should do?
Yes, I mean.
Can you guide us?
Yeah, so I think that the governance arrangements for any CCO you might consider will be at the heart of the next phase of work you do. The CCOs obviously have worked very effectively in some parts of the country and not effectively in others in the views of their political shareholders. So I won't be drawn into comments around that, although I would note that we did undertake advice to the previous Auckland Council around the effectiveness of their CCO arrangements, and I'm happy to make that available to your councillors as in the public domain. So it is an indirect form of control. You do have to be confident that you have the levers to influence prioritisation and outcomes that are important to your community. It also is proposed that the board of these be competency-based. That is, in your case, you'll be looking for people who are incredibly experienced at managing large, lumpy, technical term we've all shared before, capital investment programs of a rate and size that you haven't governed before. They need to be properly good at that in the future for your council, but also for your region. So I think that the next step of, should you go down this path and choose to, once you make your decision early next year, the development of the constitution, the design of the organisation, the appointment arrangements, the establishment arrangements, how issues related to dispute, the public accountability arrangements in terms of how frequently they come to you in public forum, all of those disciplines will be the work. That's the work of the next phase if you decide to go down that path.
Yeah, I think just to follow up, if I may, Councillor Mobenge, I think there's a definite tension between feeling like there's some influence, but actually you have to maintain balance sheet separation, which means you can't be micromanaging your CCO. So is there any comment you might like to make on that further about how that might play out?
Yeah, so there will be expectations, in particular of those who provide debt to an organisational form like a CCO, around the degree to which the revenue is not influenced by political decision making. So the lenders of debt will have views around the objectivity, professionalism and competence of how investment decisions are made. And so a lot of the work that is going on in Wellington and in the local Water Done Well program, and focused first at water care, is around the expectations around how those decisions are made. And in order to get balance sheet separation, there will need, as the Mayor has said, a degree of separation from political decision making. So as I said, you will need to satisfy yourself that that the governance of the entities is the right governance for the nature of the asset investment program and service delivery program that you have going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Mobenge, carry on with your questioning.
Got a couple more. So that really brings you to the point that if the rules aren't right, it doesn't matter how big the CCO is, if the rules aren't right, it can be a flawed system right from the beginning. And I look at the transport agency separation in Auckland again. They make decisions that really aren't related to the community or those that are funding them. So I just remain nervous about that one. And my second question is, how big does a unitary authority have to be in order to stand alone? This council has gone from about 50,000 to 60,000.
Councillor Mobenge, that's not really an appropriate question to ask.
Yes, it is.
No, you're talking about unitary authorities and size of them. If it's about scale of a water authority, then by all means go ahead. But I think you'll get into political area.
My question, sir, is how big does a local authority have to be a unitary authority?
No, I said no.
I still ask it.
Councillor Wickers.
Am I correct in assuming that what the major hurdle that we've got is the debt to revenue ratio, breaching that? Yeah. So looking at your graph, we only breach it for 6 years, and then after that, it rapidly falls away from that. So that if we wanted to maintain it in-house, we really only have to solve the 6-year problem. Is that fair?
Through the Mayor, as Sarah's alluded to, there are a number of areas where we may not necessarily follow the required rules under the new legislation, and one of those also includes depreciation. So there's not just one factor involved with that next stage of the process. At the moment, our depreciation turns to our targeted rate in that year, as opposed to a traditional depreciation model, which puts aside money year on year. So until we get through the full analysis under the new requirements, we still might be looking at some changes. So we'll be in a better position once we've gone through that next phase of work.
Thank you. Councillor Joyce.
So I know I've asked this question before, but where we talk about cross-subsidisation, have your investigations told us, we haven't got the charging right, but who's subsidising who at the moment?
Yeah, no, we haven't. There's a very good question, and I think that when it comes to cross-subsidisation of services like water, where you actually have a network, it is quite difficult to, and it's quite a complex area of pricing and financial modelling. So we haven't undertaken that. So what I'm saying is you would expect in the round that professionally managed assets would, at a point in time, be undertaking investment in one area and not in another, which could be perceived in your world as a cross-subsidisation, but in my world is actually just the way you manage big capital investment programs. We haven't undertaken the analysis to look at whether particular users or particular locations are paying more than they should or ought. That would be the kind of information that you could expect if you were looking forward towards some of the recommendations we have about considering revenue smoothing and price smoothing. You are just beginning the journey of getting better segmented reporting and financial information around each of these individual activities, and it's been a kind of a rapid progress you've been making. So that is a very reasonable question and a very reasonable expectation. And you're at the starting blocks of getting to that. I don't know whether you would be able to definitively have that by the time you need to make your decision, because it is quite a complex area of modelling, and it would require, probably more information you might have about the regulatory regime. But the general direction of travel is that professionally run infrastructure assets and services like this would have a degree of network management. So, unders and overs across the network at a particular point in time, managed in a balance sheet capacity on the whole, but with revenue that's properly tied to kind of what it costs to operate them.
Another question if I may, I'm not sure if this one may be more for staff, but obviously, as Councillor Wickers has pointed out, we have a debt issue, and this is where a lot of our debt sits. And we also know Tauranga has quite a high debt level. So have we had a chance yet, or is it part of the next process, to look at Tauranga's books and see what, how they're looking? Because it's logical to look at a CCO, but obviously if we're not in a good position, they're not in a good position, putting two not good positions doesn't make it positive.
I'll just answer your first question as well in response to Sarah's response, that we do have about 8% of our stormwater being covered by a UAGC, for example. So there is some work to be done, and as Sarah's pointed out, it is a journey for a lot of councils now to look at their all of council books and to isolate this. To Councillor Coxhead's point earlier, we will be required to prepare an annual report for Three Waters moving forward. So, we're on a journey now to separate those accounts and ring fence fully. But I will let Ariel talk to the work that would undertake with TCC in and around that side of things.
So staff have been working with TCC, and there is an expectation that we will be sharing information, and that will be part of that decision-making process for council and for them as well.
Yeah, I think I also would add that some of this aspect has been discussed at the Mel Forum as well, and high-level financials presented as well. So I don't think it's at the level of detail that we're now getting, but that has been done at a high level already. But John?
And maybe assuming something in your question, Councillor, the coming together of two balance sheets and income to borrowing ratios that aren't going to make it flash. That'll really come through the charging that'll need to change. Yeah, it's there is no magic in the balance sheets or the current financial positions coming together.
There is no fairy godmother, in other words.
Sorry?
There is no fairy godmother.
No. Yes.
Councillor Granger.
Thank you. Picking up on your point earlier, Sarah, about the lenders wanting no political interference in the CCO decisions, doesn't it bring us straight back to all the objections we had about Labour's Three Waters proposal, that, you know, the council, we as a council decide that we want to put housing in Te Puna or wherever, but the CCO decides they want to invest all the money in Welcome Bay. How does that work if we can't have some influence over where they spend the money?
Through the Mayor, so as with any other council-controlled organisation, council is involved in setting the statement of intent, and then that outlines some of those rules and processes for getting the requirements of this council being heard through that process. But obviously under a professional board that uses their knowledge and skill to make good decisions.
If I might, sorry, John. If I might just also add, I think a distinct difference between what you have to choose from next year and in the past is that while the broad model is similar and the broad pressures on that model are similar, you will have more direct ability to design particular requirements that you might feel are necessary for your community. You will have the discipline on that design because there is this need for balance sheet separation. But if you have some particular aspects of your community that you think is working well in terms of how they input into the way you make decisions now, then the test for people who are supporting you to design that will be, will that meet the measure and will that satisfy balance sheet separation? So the other aspect, of course, is you have the choice not to move to a model like that. You have the choice to make the decisions that you might need to deliver on a standalone basis. So that's the kind of key difference. The model is in the detail a little bit different in terms of what's proposed around the relationship with the LGFA under the different options that the government's provided, some of the detail of how the constitution might be developed and things like that. So it's similar, but there are differences, and as reflected by the government's policy position, much more decision-making rights sitting with you about how you take the model forward.
Yeah, and I think just to add there, agree with all of that, and you'll remember we've already determined a lot of that. What does success look like for us as a council as we move forward, and what do we want to apply any of our optionality or analysis against, which includes how do we have that local voice meet our standards, be financially viable. So we have agreed and looked at a lot of that criteria, and that will be really important that we keep our eye on that through that design process.
Thank you. Councillor Thwaites.
Thanks, Sarah. It's great that this now report is in our full public agenda, and now we can speak to it with our public freely. So that's removed the shackles, and it shows the potential of the charging in 10 years from now being well over 100% increase. So that's a good thing we can talk to. And of course, now Tauranga City have got full access to exactly the same report we have. They did report at their council meeting that beyond next year, they just blow out beyond their debt limits for the whole years. I just want to make my observations that this seems really city-centric design. They don't take into account, like a district council like us, how we've run our balanced budget across the whole lot. And I guess I compare it to if the central government were forced to fully fund depreciation for the hospital, schooling system and police buildings throughout the whole. The other guy's making the rules down in Wellington, but they don't want to apply it to themselves. They want to kick us around and blow out water. And I just think some unintended consequences are going to start to emerge from this, and we can speak to people about it, and they can start to put questions to their politicians that, did you really intend that this is the intention you want to solve some of the big metro problems, which seem to be the big problems, the Palmerston Norths, the Wellingtons, the Porirua, the Hamiltons, the Tauranga, as opposed to the districts that have that combined strength across their balance sheet. So, like I said, I'm glad it's out in the open now and we can go and start talking to it, because I just think the politicians haven't fully thought it through and they're just foisting something on us that seems blooming hard when they're not prepared to live by the same rules and build hospitals and schools and see what has to give way to make sure that the hospitals and the schools are working properly. But anyway, I'll raise that with my politicians.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Yeah.
I'm not sure, Mr. Mayor, that there's a,
No, I'm just
there's a
making my
question in
point.
there for me.
No, I'm just making my point today.
I-
There's a lot of water to flow under the bridge.
There is a lot of
all
water
through
to
the
flow under
pipes.
the bridge,
Yeah, yeah.
that is true. And should anyone have any time in the break time, I'm happy to traverse public sector accounting standards and the way that depreciation is treated in the health sector, but I would not like to occupy the full council session time on that.
Tracy, did you have a, yeah, Councillor Cox.
Sorry, I changed my mind a little bit there. So just a couple of, I'll give you the three questions all at once. I don't know if you covered this, Sarah, before, but talking about what you mentioned, Murray, the other difference being that the ownership still stays with the ratepayers, irrespective of it being managed in a CCO, correct? Yep. The going to what John said, so yes, you know, you increase revenue to cover the costs, right? But the other thing is the perceived or the supposed economies of scale, and to what what percentage or what extent will that have an impact as well if we are to look at the Tauranga CCO? And the last one, is there any more talk from Parliament about GST sharing? I haven't heard any more, but yeah, you might have.
So yeah, I'll take those three questions in turn. Yes, ownership would remain with the local authority in terms of CCO. That's been very clear, and I actually, and the government's been very clear on that as well. In terms of revenue and efficiency in terms of economies of scale and efficiency assumptions that might be achieved through combination, we didn't do that work. Obviously, we're only looking at yours. That is the work that you should be testing. You already work well with Tauranga. You have, and you have this in common with a lot of councils around the country. You have, you've got joint procurement in terms of some aspects of your service provision. Often when people think about economies of scale, a lot of those economies have already been, I'm going to use the term, extracted by your service providers. So like by Downers, by Fulton Hogan, they're already operating across councils at scale, efficiently deploying people and trucks to fix water problems. Your scale efficiencies will come from the debt capacity, financing efficiency, from the degree to which your future CapEx program will require more technical specialism and expert kind of people to manage, large program managers. You do have a bit of a shortage of really good project managers in-house relative to your scale of investment work ahead, which is to say that you need to clone, a bit of cloning needs to occur. So when the advice comes back to you around whether you should go in combination, you need to ask whoever's before you, what is the efficiency assumption from the two organisations? How does that efficiency assumption trend against historic patterns of spending in both organisations? Is it same, better off? Is it heroic, or is it reasonable based on your judgment? And then also where you think the big opportunities will be for achieving scale benefits in your procurement So buying things in the future, you know, and managing that lumpy capital program you've got in combination. So that's the kind of where your particular economies of scale are likely to come from.
You would have to assume that personnel would reduce though, wouldn't you? I mean, you wouldn't have this, you know, the two current numbers pushed together, would you? I mean, you'd have to assume, and like you say, you have to have the right bums on the right seats.
Yeah, so hard to tell because we haven't done a full like organisational look at your FTE ratios and things like that. That's the kind of thing you should be asking in the next phase. What I would say is what I said to you last time, which is you do have an ambitious program of work forecast, and you know, and you haven't quite delivered on your full program in the past. So there's lots of work to do. Most of the change that you'll need to contemplate will be at a senior level, and actually for your council, it will be what that means to your overheads and your costs back in the rest of council that remains. That can be ameliorated to an extent by, you know, not needing a fancy new building, co-location of staff, shared services arrangements, all of those kinds of things. That's the kind of work that would come. When you get your next set of decisions, I expect, although, you know, I don't know, it will be at the high level. And then you'd look at it and you'd say there's an assumption that with scale, you'll get a 2% efficiency on what would be your costs otherwise if you didn't bring organisations together. That would seem reasonable to me, probably on the lighter end. You won't get to know things like bums on seats and how staff would be impacted until an establishment phase. Yeah. The last question, GST, I mean, it's a bit like the previous question. I think people were expecting maybe a little bit more from the announcement about the city and regional deal approach in terms of openness to that. Most people, when it comes to new revenue instruments and GST, will be looking to those individual deal arrangements for a discussion on revenue that might be available to fund those deals. I mean, I have no information, and I am entering into, you know, in my experience and reading tea leaves, but it's unlikely that you would get a regional variation for GST treatment. It's just impossible to enforce. So, but there are other revenue options that may or may not be on the table. So.
Thank you. Councillor Murray Benge, Councillor Joyce, then Councillor Thwaites.
I think the coalition agreement should have something in it about GST sharing, I would think, but I haven't looked at it. Thank you for the research that you're doing and preparing us as you are. So my view is, how does the average person in the community make contact and have the service within every structure that we've got options on? How do they actually have an influence with their elected representatives, be it on the CCOs or within local government itself? I think that, for me, is one of the critical questions, so that you know the service, quality service is going to be delivered that people are wanting. And if they can't get that inroad into the system, that you know they balloon out like the regional council does, and nobody has control.
So my old dad, who passed away a couple of years ago, and forgive people who have went to the local government forum and they've heard the story, he was deputy mayor and chair of a strategy and finance committee for sort of near on 12 years. And when I started to work in this area, he reminded me that while he spent most of his time looking at the balance sheet of the council and the service demands across the entire district, most of his conversations with his constituents were about the footpath at the end of the street and the sewage, you know, overflows into the Raglan Harbour. So there is a disconnect there, and you face that every day, that the feedback you get in the supermarket is a bit disconnected to the levers that you have. It is true that a CCO would mean that you would have to have the conversation, which is, look, you know, you know, we don't deliver that anymore, but I'll take it up. And those mechanisms for you taking it up with a CCO will need to be robust, and you'll need to make sure that they're accountable to you for dealing with your concerns really well. The one thing I would say, and that's hard, you know, that's why you choose your job and I choose not to have your job. That is hard, and that was also Dad's career advice. So what I think you need to weigh on is the complaints you'll get if the investment doesn't occur. That's what you need to think about. Not the complaints that you've had in the past or the complaints that you might worry about that you might get in the future where you might have less control than you have now. And I can understand it's very human to think you know your council staff very well and they're very responsive to you and you know who to call and you can flick them a text. And that would be, no, don't flick them a text. You know, that's very familiar. You really need to, going into this decision, think about how you'll deal with complaints if you don't get the investment away. Yeah, well, I wouldn't comment on another council I haven't advised. I'm advising you, yeah. So that's a long story for saying it is hard, your jobs are hard. Dad said don't do them, support them. So that's what I focused on and think about how you do it if you can't get the investment away.
Thank you. Councillor Joyce.
On page 265 in the agenda, but it's the FinCo part of your report. We've discussed this before. I mean, we're a high growth area. For example, the Te Puke wastewater treatment plant is there. A large amount, not totally, but a large amount of there for growth with Rangiuru and other parts of Te Puke, yet we're not allowed under the current government's rules to include FinCos in our maths. How big a factor is that in our affordability for a high growth council like Western Bay?
So it's definitely quite a big factor. There, so I'm looking at my page numbering is an issue.
Yeah, it always is. This is a section headed up Three Waters Financing Sufficiency Financial Contribution.
That's the same page I'm on as well. So, so following our last meeting with you, we did go back and test what would happen if the LGFA recognised financial contributions and what would happen if you increased your revenue sooner. Potentially in combination, those two factors, if pulled in harmony, could mean, theoretically, you could go it alone. However, based on current information, we think it remains unlikely that the LGFA will recognise FinCos. But if by the time you make your decision they are, and the high growth way they're approaching high growth councils changes that picture, that is a very relevant consideration for you. But it would need to occur based on the numbers set out in the bottom graph. It would need to occur in parallel with a decision on revenue smoothing, that is bringing forward your revenue increases sooner rather than later. That's why you've got me saying, it depends. And maybe you can talk a little bit because you're on the shareholder council of the LGFA, or you may not be able to talk, so I don't want to land you in it.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. There's probably no further information at this point in time because those decisions haven't been finalised, but it's unlikely, probably to Sarah's point.
I mean, the follow-up question is more for Adele, is, you know, what you do in the commercial world is you discount back, right? You just say, well, you don't count 100% of your future FinCos because they're uncertain, but you can be reasonably certain that you'll get, I don't know, whatever the number is, 70%, 80%. Yeah, has that approach been tried with LGFA to bring a more commercial lens? Because otherwise, it's current ratepayers paying for growth, effectively.
In short, the answer is no, not yet. But yeah, we can certainly look at those options, but they will want to apply a consistent formula across the country.
Councillor Thwaites.
Got a question for you this time, Sarah. And I'll start stating about the utilisation of charges under a CCO, and now I'll pad it out a little bit by saying, what sort of time frame would you envisage that if you did join up multiple councils, that they would start working towards standardisation of charges? You talked about political events, but if you're going to have a CCO and they're going to operate two separate charging to the two former partners or three former, however many there are, what's the point of a CCO if you can't align them up? And I see that as a vital part to sell it going forward, that you're all either in it together or you're not. So standardisation, is that a big part of thinking amongst the designers of these things?
Yes, so the last time we met, I was asked a question about pricing principles, and I can't myself find the particular part of our report where we talk about the kind of general pricing principles that would guide pricing and revenue decisions into the future. Government hasn't released what they think those should be for the new economic regulator, but we included in our analysis examples of what was proposed under the previous government's reform, because it's largely general about how you make these kind of, how an economic regulator who would ultimately be having a much greater role in the prices that are charged would view things. Typically, the process to harmonise prices, which is the process of making sure that, you know, users or customers of similar characteristics are paying basically in broad order the same for the same level of service, is distinct from revenue smoothing, which is the process of how they experience price increases. Those are two quite different concepts. That can take 10 years, 15 years. It takes a long time. Nobody wants to have a price shock for, including regulated utility providers and CCOs. So it would take a time to firstly get on top of the different charges, and then secondly, decide what fair would look like in terms of those different users. And then thirdly, begin a smooth process of bringing those charges together. So it would take some time.
Thank you. Before we go to Councillor Daly, I understand that Adele has an answer for Councillor Granger's earlier question.
Thank you, and through the Mayor. And just in response, the question was in regards to the water, sorry, just bringing it up here, consumption charge. So we can confirm that, oh, sorry, just bring up my notes here, that they have been included. It's just the information that's come through for the table for Sarah, and they should be $1.42, and then adjusted for growth over time.
Okay.
$3.43 adjusted for growth and inflation.
Councillor Daly.
Sarah, your comment about there will be a need to employ more high-level staff in the Three Water space. Is that taken into account the current staff levels at TCC as well, or you're not aware of that?
So the point I made is that with a capital program as large as is forecast for you, you will need somewhere in the system more competent program managers, so people who can properly oversee large capital programs. So not necessarily that there will be more people employed, I don't want to be quoted on that, but that you have an increased demand for that capability, we can see by looking at your forward CapEx program. So like I said, the next phase of work, well actually the next phase of work for you guys is, are we going joint or not? That will be high-level financial information, similar to what I've provided, but combined with you and TCC if you want to go down that path. The step after that would be to design that CCO in a way that meets your expectations around governance and prioritisation and you know, your ability to influence the things that are important for your constituents, and the design of the organisation itself. That's when you'll find out how many FTEs and whether there's too many staff or not enough staff.
So I guess we currently rely on engineering design companies to design something and then the contractor to deliver it and staff to oversee it, but we need another step in the middle maybe.
You need more staff to oversee it if you want to deliver the size of the capital works program you have at the rate you've said that you would want? And sorry, I'll leave it to your council officers.
Yeah, so I think a lot of it is actually the structure that you implement in terms of your capital program delivery. So like Sarah's saying, you implementing a program, then work stream type approach, and then having less consultants in that leading space, or you're having more technical people in your team. So I think the later part of the development will enable what sort of resourcing you actually need. I think a big part of it is also picking what, it's not so much I think people's an important role, but it's the process to get to the point of delivery. What I mean by that is what will the CCO do in terms of hurdles or terms of process or support services to get there in terms of procurement timeframes, resource consenting. It's the planning aspect that needs to be considered, or how the benefits of a CCO can help shorten that duration. Using as an example, how do you plan for your transportation program when you only get your letter 2 weeks ago? So it's how you try and, it's not so much the procurement and then the design and the delivery, it's actually how you get to that point through decision making, through political drivers, through consultation, through community. That's what delays your projects, and why you have a clumpy capital program, because there's plenty of firms out there, plenty of suppliers out there who can do it. It's just getting to the point of being able to have a design and deliver once you've done all the, what I call enabling work.
Okay, councillors, I think bearing in mind that this is just an approval to do more exploration really rather than decision making, I think we better move on to the recommendations. So there's 5 recommendations there, as I said, essentially to explore delivery models and to work with TCC on that. Do I have a mover? Councillor Joyce, Councillor Murray-Benge. Is there any debate on this one? Councillor.
So I agree with this, right? This is out in the open now. It's obviously, these things are complicated and they do take a lot of investigation. For those following along at home, I would suggest there's a page which I'm frantically trying to scroll towards. The best one to look at, if you really want to see what the problem is, look at page 267 of the agenda, where the summary assessment is. 5 main bullet points. The best we get on any of them is a yellow. There's nothing that we're green on, basically. And we have huge challenges. The challenges of the water industry are long known. This is very different to the previous government's approach, which has been said already was prescriptive. Also, every time they had a roadblock, they seem to introduce more bureaucracy, another level of advisory committee or whatever. So we've avoided all that, but that still means the problems are still there. In particular, if you look at the 3rd bullet point, which is the part where the rubber hits the road, the debt path represents a highly leveraged position and would not be considered prudent or sustainable by local government or water industry standards. That's where we are. We have got a lot of money to spend. We're in a difficult situation because we're so spread out, right? And to be fair, we also started late, right? Wellington's got the opposite problem of having 100-year-old infrastructure that it hasn't maintained. Ours, well, we started about amalgamation time in 1989, as I understood. So, we started late on 3 waters, and we're very spread out. And we're a high growth council, and on page 265 of the agenda, it talks about the fact that FinCos can't be budgeted in our math. And that's actually quite a big chunk of revenue when you're growing. So the problems are real. We need to look at options. We need to look deeply at all the available options. We have to be able to answer the concerns that have already been raised around this council table around accountability, but we also need to be able to deliver. And the last bullet point on page 267, projected revenue increases occur late in the long-term plan period, and which means charges exceed a common international benchmark for water affordability of 2.5% of median household income. There's no good answers here at the moment, so we need to look at all options, and that's what this allows for. But it's going to be difficult, and it's going to be a big decision, and it's already been alluded to. We've also got to look at what happens, to the council once we've made that decision. So a lot of work to be done.
Thank you, Councillor Joyce. Councillor Murray-Benge.
I was thinking actually of The Scent of a Woman and Robert De Niro's comments in it. I've been around, he said. And in this particular case, I've been around too. And having gone through CCOs before, I'm just so grateful to our CEO to make sure that we've got the quality research that's being delivered to us. And I thank you very much, Sarah, because it's not easy and you've put all the options in front of us. We're not there yet. But for the community out there, for the individual ratepayer, they can be really confident that this council is doing the research that it requires to do in order to come to a conclusion that meets their needs. And so I think, sir, so far so good, and we've yet to make the really tough decisions, but I think that way that the community is being involved in this is really important. And it's now, as Councillor Swaite says, it's now out in the public arena and people can talk to us about it and they can talk to our staff. But I think so far, so good. We're in for change, and I must have a look at where this GST sharing is actually coming from and going to, because government takes the taxes and we're the ones who are the recipients of all the work that they decide that we're capable of doing without any funds coming to us. And I know that was an issue in the last election. So they're going to watch clearly what they are contributing. But so far, so good. And I just look forward to the next report. Thank you so much. And the negotiations with Tauranga City, I have no confidence in going any bigger than that. I'd just like to know as to how well we can do what we are doing and how we can improve on where we are. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll say a few words before I put the motion. It's clear from the independent analysis, and thank you, Sarah, for that, that meeting the financial sustainability requirements of Three Waters in-house will be challenging, if not impossible. So this is a welcome step in exploring options for Three Waters service delivery that meets the legislative requirements of the government's local water done well reforms. So this is just the next step in that, and look forward to hopefully refining it and seeing where we get to in the actual decision making. But for now, it's progressing with exploring options. So with that, I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, we actually have another kind of Three Waters issue coming up now. So moving on to page 286, we've got the Katikati Wastewater Disposal Future Directions appointment to Te Ohu Waiora. Cedric. Okay, Cedric, thank you.
Yep, through you, Mr. Chair. So this is basically formalising the working group for the Katikati Outfall project. So we've met with both tangata whenua and the elected members of interest in terms of what that structure will look like and how the reporting lines will go up. So basically this is formalising the community representatives as per the consent. So
thank you, Cedric. I understand Councillor Thwaites has a question.
It's mainly to you, Mayor Denia. Under 5, is the numbers on it totally fixed, or is there a chance that a third councillor from that ward could be included in it?
It's not fixed, but the requirement is that they live in Katikati.
Well, but you've got the Matakana representatives on it too. And my further comment was, I believe you'd probably want to invite at least 2 representatives from Matakana, given the difficulty.
They are at least 1 representative from Matakana, at least 1 representative.
But it can be more.
Yeah, it can be.
Because where you actually live, they represent that.
No, this is a resource consent condition. It's not my decision. It's a.
Sounds dodgy to me.
Yeah. Okay, Councillor Murray Binge.
Move the recommendation, Sue.
Thank you. But are there any questions in the meantime? Councillor Granger? Or you were seconding?
My question is also the same as Don. So if it's at least 2 and we've gone to 3, we should be able to go to 4. I mean,
but there's no one else who qualifies.
No.
Why does councillor Sol not qualify to represent this area?
It doesn't live in Katikati.
Doesn't
No,
what?
it talks about the Katikati community, so. I do. Anyway, we discussed this and the requirements of the resource consent condition.
Can I help? It's on page 287, section 4C. Okay, have a read of that.
Thank you.
Page what?
287 of the agenda, section 4C. Alan and I have already asked, right? So that's the answer I got.
Okay, so it's been moved by Councillor Murray Benj, Councillor Joyce seconding. Is there any debate on this? Bearing in mind there's a lot of water to go under the bridge on this one again. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Moving on to page 289, which is the CCTV Working Party Delegation's appointments for this current financial year. So it's pretty straightforward. We may even finish it before Rachel gets to the front. But essentially, this is carrying on the process that was initiated in the 2021 LTP and just having to update the councillors appointed. And the only difference here is we're adding Councillor Ray to this one. So assuming there's no questions. Councillor Joyce?
Can I ask a couple of questions? One is, and just going from the last meeting, we didn't really look at where the current cameras are and whether they're working properly. I think it only came up in passing that one had been stolen. So as part of the subcommittee, can we also look at what's working, what's not working with the CCTV?
I think that's more of a projects and monitoring
okay, but it hasn't gone there either. It hasn't gone there either about cameras getting stolen and what's happening. And the other one was, I gather the monitoring thereof and arrangements thereof.
Okay. So these project monitoring questions, the panel is about where they are situated.
Okay, that's fine, but at least it could be taken up somewhere because we do need to know that A, they're being maintained well and B, monitored well.
Okay, I think I'll leave that with colleague Councillor Thwaites.
We can do that, sir. As a subcommittee, those are the questions.
No, it's not in the delegation. So that's take it up with Councillor Thwaites and Councillor Sol and in their committee, and that's the appropriate place for that. Okay. So I'm happy to move those 4 recommendations. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Granger. Any debate? No. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Okay, so the next item is 11.7 on page 292, which is my mayor's report. So in there, I say that I'm going to give a verbal update on the Regional Infrastructure Fund. I think all I'll say there is, well, a few things I'll say. There was a strong lineup of MPs present, where Winston Peters, Shane Jones, Todd McClay, Dana Kirkpatrick, Tama Potaka, Mark Patterson and Jenny Marcroft, as well as Robert Pigu, who's head of Kānoa, the Regional Economic and Development Investment Unit. The Regional Infrastructure Fund is 1.2 billion in total, but it was made very clear that that's mostly going to be given in debt or equity rather than grants. Nigel Tuck from Priority One presented on behalf of Western Bay of Plenty. And so another person who many of you might know around the table, Liz Te Amo, was on the Māori Economic Development Panel, and she mentioned her desire for the Rangiru Business Park extension. I would say also that our opportunities for this fund are limited, with our role more about supporting third-party applicants that align with our regional priorities. As I said, with a debt and equity focus, it's really quite focused on commercial operations. So it makes it challenging for us. But anyway, that's my update on that. But happy to take questions on the RIF or any other item in my report. Councillor Joyce.
I'm not expecting it today, but can we get a report, please, on how many elected members attended the LGNZ conference and what was the cost to the ratepayers of same?
Okay, well, from councillors, that was me and Councillor Coxhead and Councillor Daly. Yeah, and then the other ones were community board members, and they were they were paid from their own budget, so I'd probably best to ask them.
But can we get,
Oh, well, they're actually, they're all detailed in their agendas and minutes about how much was.
can we get that compiled together, please, as a report, from them? Does the CEO know how many elected members were?
I'm sure that information can be provided. Any other questions? Councillor Maybench.
Not a question. I'd just like to say thank you for taking the other councillors, because in the past it's only been the mayor and the deputy and nobody else has had the opportunity. So I thank you for actually making sure that we've had a couple of new councillors going, and I think the community board one, I'm not sure how important that conference is, but the local government one is important, and I'm not satisfied with the local government association. The leadership of it, to be so rude to the Prime Minister, I thought was totally unacceptable.
I'm not sure. I think there's a bit of misinformation that has spread since then on that.
Sorry?
There's been a bit of misinformation on that aspect, and I think we need to be careful about making accusations like that.
I'm only saying what I read in the paper.
Yeah, so some people have made comments about that. It was my understanding, obviously I'm not intimately involved in it, is that he requested a 10-minute talk and no Q&A. Other people have interpreted it as he was somehow snubbed, but probably best to ask President Sam Broughton about that.
I'm not referring to that, sir. I'm referring to the comments that were made after he spoke.
Okay,
By
it was a controversial speech he gave, and there was some response, but yeah, not involved. Thank you. Any more questions for me? Okay. Well, I'm happy to move my report then. So there's a seconder for me. Councillor Henry. Assuming there's no debates, put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. So the last item in the open agenda is the Community Matching Fund outcomes, which is information receipt. But is there any questions for Jodie, or I assume Sam's here for that? Any questions on that? Would any of the panel like to speak to it? No? Okay, so there's no recommendation required. Oh, sorry, Councillor Mobin. There's no recommendation required, I believe, so. Hang on, have I got the. My run sheet is slightly different. Okay, so thank you, Councillor Mobin. You move the recommendations 1 to 3 that we receive that information and note the distributions. Councillor Sol seconding. If there's no debate, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. I'll move that we now resolve to exclude the public to go into confidential. Councillor Granger